As we enter into honkaistarrail's 2.0 update, we are greeted by the mommy of all mummies, the gyat of all gyats, and Kafka's game-changing partner, Black Swan. Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video. Black Swan possesses one of, if not the most unique kit for DPS we have seen so far. Not only is she different from our traditional crit DPS, she is also slightly different from our traditional DOT DPS due to how Arcana works. Today, we will be taking a look at her character kit, Eidolons, Relics, lightcones, and team compositions. And without further ado, let's get into today's content. Subscribe! Starting off with Black Swan's character kit, do note that going forward, I will not be as in-depth with regards to the actual kit itself, such as the abilities and tracers, since we do extensively cover this in our Pokke's Classroom series, especially our pre-release analysis. So I do recommend you guys to go check it out. And instead, this entire CN unit analysis will be focusing a lot more on the actual insightful opinions that CN may have towards a certain unit, in this case Black Swan, namely the actual multipliers, now that we actually know about them. So jumping into the abilities, Black Swan's basic attack essentially applies up to 2 stacks of Arcana when a target suffers from a DOT, but it does have a very low base chance of 65%, and this is going to be consistent for all of our abilities, as we'll see later on. Given our knowledge for Black Swan's kit, we know that effect hit rate will be an integral part of building Black Swan. And then jumping into Black Swan's skill, it applies the defense down and Arcana to 3 targets, such as the destruction targeting with 1 main target and 2 adjacent targets. The defense down itself, it does last for 3 turns. Note that the base chance for this skill, it is unchanged, right? We do have a fixed 100% base chance of marking a defense down, but the defense down multiplier, it does improve slightly from 14.8% to 20.8%, which is a 6% defense down increase. Between this skill and her talent slash ultimate, this is definitely not as much of a priority. And then jumping into Black Swan's ultimate, it is integral to Black Swan's kit, but it is not as important as her actual talent itself, and I will be explaining about this later on. But basically, Black Swan's ultimate, the first portion is a 25% vulnerability debuff, which is excellent debuff that not only benefits Black Swan, but also her other DOT teammates such as Kafka. With Arcana being regarded as all 4 DOT status, as well as not resetting Arcana for 1 turn, this can create some incredible damage potential immediately after casting Black Swan's ultimate, especially with Kafka triggering set DOT at very high Arcana stacks. Without Black Swan's ultimate, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to reach the 50 stack Arcana cap, since Arcana will always reset back to 1 stack whenever it is the enemy's turn. So at this point, it is also worth noting that Kafka or any DOT triggers should attempt to trigger their DOTs before the enemy turn begins, while not under Epiphany effect. If Kafka is going to be casting an ultimate, we do want to cast Kafka's ultimate before the enemy turns begin. If not, we will lose all of the Arcana stacks. Then jumping into Black Swan's most important part of ability, which is a talent. This is going to be Black Swan's bread and butter, which is the absolute highest priority to level, as not only does it impact Arcana's base multipliers, which is integral to Black Swan's damage output, it also increases its base chance of applying Arcana, going from a 50% base chance to a 65% base chance. Consider that we can stack Arcana up to a whopping 50 stacks with the help of our ultimate. It will have up to a 840% multiplier at level 10, compared to a 714% multiplier at, let's say, level 8. So taking into account the defense ignored on top of all this at 7 stacks, Black Swan's talent is going to be extremely important to level. In fact, way more important than any of the other things. And then lastly, for Black Swan's technique, it greatly frontloads Arcana stacking for the first DOT triggers, and we'll pretty much always use this technique since this is not an attack, so not much to be discussed over here. Then jumping into Black Swan's tracers, we have 28% attack, 14% wind damage, and 10% effect hit rate. These are all excellent minor tracers all around. There's absolutely no wastage here. Every single one of these tracers will be used by Black Swan. And then going to the very first major trace, Viscera's Discord, it essentially allows Black Swan to stack on 1 additional Arcana stack when using a skill against an enemy with DOT. Now do note that if we do use our skill against a target with 4 DOTs, it can create up to 4 Arcana stacks, since it does create 1 additional Arcana for each respective DOT. And then as a result, Black Swan's rotation will very likely have an skill usage followed following her ultimate to improve Arcana stacks, since under Epiphany, our Arcana will account as all 4 sources of DOT. Next, for Gobbler's Dredges, it essentially allows additional Arcana stacks to be applied for targets entering the battle as well as our allies itself. With good effect hit rate, this allows up to another 3 additional sets of Arcana as long as our ally applies DOT. So some notable allies that can trigger this will include Sampo, Guinaifen, Luca, and even Astar's basic attack, which does have a burn in itself, right? And then lastly, for Candle Flame's Portent, to gain the full effect of this talent over here, we will need to have 120% effect hit rate to result in the full 72% damage buff. Now, as a result of this trace, alongside with Arcana's incredibly low base chance, it is a must for all players to stack on very high effect hit rate on Black Swan than any other DPS, not only for the damage percentage buff, but simply to ensure that our Arcana is applied to the enemy target. Now, one important thing to note over here is that for a base chance of 65%, a unit would actually need a 156% EHR for 100% accuracy against an enemy with 40 effect rest. This means that at 120% effect hit rate, there is a chance for Arcana to not apply, right? It essentially is around an 85% accuracy against an enemy target with 40 rest. But against an enemy target with 30 effect rest, then it does gain 100% accuracy. So whether players want to gamble on this, especially against enemy targets that have 40% effect rest, that's going to be up to them. But personally, as well as just general for comfort usage, 120% effect hit rate should be more than enough for almost every single content in Honkai Star Rail. Now, jumping into Black Swan's Eidolons, we will be testing out Black Swan's Eidolons momentarily after we go live as of the time of this recording, but just briefly touching on each of her more important Eidolons. The first one is gonna be E1, absolute game changer Eidolon, and it's really good that we have this at Eidolon 1. I've essentially mentioned multiple times previously, rest penetration is one of, if not the largest benefits to any DPS units, crit or DOT. Black Swan's Eidolon 1 in particular is even better than most rest penetrations, since this applies to all 4 DOT elemental rest, which is lightning, wind, physical, and fire, which means that the benefits that Black Swan provides not only impacts herself as well as the secondary DOT teammate as well, on top of all DOT procs triggered under Epiphany as well as even simulated universe, right? So as a result, Eidolon 1 is extremely powerful for Black Swan. And then moving on to Eidolon 2, this will greatly improve the damage scaling against multi-target content such as Memory of Chaos and Pure Fiction after spreading Arcana to new targets upon defeating the old ones. Not nearly as impactful as Eidolon 1, but considering that it does help deal with mobs as well as multi-target, and it ensures that our new targets will always have a very high Arcana stacks, which can trigger the additional effects such as from the 3 stacks as well as the 7 stack Arcana. It is also a pretty decent Eidolon to have, but just not as impactful as Eidolon 1. Then moving on to Black Swan's Eidolon 4, to a certain extent, Black Swan's Eidolon 4 holds even more value than Black Swan's Eidolon 6, mainly due to the effect rest reduction as well as the additional energy generated. 10% rest now ensures that even 40 rest enemies are now at 30 rest, which, as I've mentioned previously, allows Black Swan to have a 100% accuracy at 120% effect hit rate. Secondly, the 8 energy, this is per Epiphany per enemy, which means that if we were to use Black Swan's ultimate against, let's just say, a target of 5 enemies, this allows Black Swan to gain up to 40 energy regeneration, and of course this is impacted by our energy regeneration rope. So between 8 energy and 40 energy, this can potentially allow Black Swan to cast a very frequent 2-turn ultimates even without energy regeneration rope, which is very powerful. Black Swan's Eidolon 6 essentially allows her to hit the 50 stack limit on Arcana for the glorious 840% damage multiplier, which is our current single strongest DOT multiplier in the entire game. Without Eidolon 6, unless we are playing Black Swan in Simulated Universe or some very niche 3 or even 4 DOT team comps, it is pretty much impossible for Black Swan to hit this 50 stacks. But then again, this might be a slight overkill, because for most mobs, it is almost impossible that we will need the 50 stacks to kill them, and for even elites or even boss targets, this might be a slight overkill, especially if we pair up Black Swan with Kafka. But it is certainly an extremely powerful Eidolon. So in summary, Black Swan's Eidolon 1 has the highest value, even more so than a signature Lightcone 1, which we'll explain later on, while the next best Eidolons will be noted at Eidolon 4 and Eidolon 6. One small thing to note is that Black Swan's Eidolon 3, it also raises the talents level, which can be beneficial for Arcana's damage as well as her base chance to apply Arcana. Now moving on to Black Swan's energy thresholds, we know that Black Swan's ultimate is really extremely powerful, and since Epiphany do last for 2 turns, having a 3-turn ultimate would be really good, whereas a 2-turn ultimate will lead to a permanent uptime on the ultimate, assuming that the target isn't too fast. So taking a look at 3 of the scenarios over here, we have one scenario where we use tutorial light cone and the other 2 scenarios where we use pretty much any other light cone, right? For the tutorial light cone scenario, you can see that using tutorial light cone with energy regeneration rope, we can cast a 3-turn ultimate with a skill point positive rotation. Or we can even cast a 2-turn ultimate with 2 skills and getting 2 kills or getting hit 2 times within those 2 turns. So if players do have tutorial light cone with energy regeneration rope, then this is something that they can consider. Then without tutorial light cone, we can use 3 skills with energy regeneration rope for 113.4 energy, which will create in the 3-turn ultimate after getting 1 kill or getting hit 1 time. So this is also something to consider. And then lastly, it's gonna be no energy regeneration rope. We can pretty much always cast a 4-turn ultimate using 4 skills consecutively, or we can still cast a 4-turn ultimate assuming that we get some kills or we get some hit over the course of 4 turns, right? Not to mention, all these scenarios do not take into account of some external factors such as Huo or Tingyun. So in summary, without factoring all the external factors, Black Swan has a very consistent 3-turn ultimate if she were to use an energy regeneration rope at the expense of 43.2% attack percentage, right? Further testings will be needed for endgame content, but it essentially boils down to how many times do players need to use Black Swan's ultimate, right? How many times do players value Black Swan's ultimate? Do you need very high frequency, or do you just want to increase Black Swan's overall damage on Arcana? So this is very similar to Run Mei, which you guys know by now. There is a slow Run Mei build which do not use energy regeneration rope, where for 0 cycles, we can just use Run Mei, 1 ultimate and just kill everything, right? So similar to Run Mei, if the enemies that Black Swan face can be defeated in shorter cycles, we can essentially front load Black Swan's damage with a higher attack percentage, which will be more beneficial than more frequent ultimates. So at the end of the day, this will be dependent on the player's account as well as the content that the player is targeting, right? So do experiment this yourselves. Then moving on to Black Swan's Relic set, you can see over here, Prisoner in Deep Confinement is gonna be the absolute best in slot as compared to every other Relic set. To nobody's surprise, right, we have 18% defense down, and it's extremely easy to get this 18% defense down due to the multitude of DOTs that we can have for Black Swan as well as our secondary DOT. And using the same logic as defense down reduction stacking, Genius 4-piece is once again proven to be a universal set due to how defense down scaling works, right? Outperforming any 2+2 combinations. Other than this, we pretty much have no other close substitutes as of version 2.0. Note that for defense down, it is especially important for Black Swan because for any DOT triggers such as Kafka, triggering Arcana will be based off of Black Swan's relics. So if our Black Swan have the 4-piece Prisoner, Kafka triggering this DOT will have the 18% defense reduction. However, if Black Swan do not have this 18% defense reduction, even if Kafka has it, there will be no defense reduction on the Arcana trigger. So that's why this 4-piece is just really important for players that want to use Black Swan. Then moving on to Black Swan's planetary set, you can see that Glamour and Space Sailing Station is gonna be the best in slot for almost every single scenario, but we can note that Pan Cosmic Commercial Enterprise slightly edges out Glamour, but we will talk about this a little bit later. But just talking about Glamour and Space Sailing Station first, as long as our players can hit the 160 speed with the help of Run Mei's speed buff, Glamour will have the highest value pretty much almost every single scenario, right? Otherwise, Space Sailing Station is going to be a good alternative. Talking about this IPC Pan Cosmic, it is an option if players are unable to get a respectable amount of effect here from the substats, and technically this 2-piece have a slightly higher scaling, very slightly, as compared to the Glamour 2-piece. However, one thing to note is that it is extremely inefficient to farm World 4 in Simulated Universe. This is basically not recommended for any player, including whales, looking to be stamina efficient due to the existence of Celestial Differentiator in World 4, which is pretty much honkaistarrail's worst planar 2-piece, right? Unless you guys want to spend resins or you guys already have a very strong IPC set, it is not recommended to farm for this specific 2-piece, and it will be much better to instead just farm for the World 8 or World 3, right? Particularly World 8, since Glamour does scale a little bit better, especially if you can hit 160 speed. Then moving on to the main stat and subset distribution, Black Swan specifically, her stat distribution is very flexible. As long as she can hit her respective benchmarks, such as 120% effect hit rate or 160 speed, she can pretty much freely allocate her stats, right? So an ideal build would be roughly 3000 attack, 160 speed, and 120% effect hit rate, assuming that we are using Glamour, right? So you can see over here the chest, you can use EHR chest or attack chest, you can run speed boots or attack boots, rope, you can run attack rope or ER rope, and sphere, you can run attack percentage or wind sphere, right? And then for the stat priority, EHR is always going to be the highest since 120% EHR, it is pretty difficult to hit. And then following which is going to be attack percentage and speed, and then following everything else. Then some notes to consider is that because 120% effect hit rate is really difficult to hit, most of the time players should be running an effect hit rate chest unless we really have a super good distribution of effect hit rate across all of our gears, right? So that's going to be an exception. And then for our sphere, attack sphere actually outperforms wind damage sphere due to the damage percentage buff from effect hit rate as well as run mace damage percentage buff, right? So something to consider. And then lastly, energy regeneration rope, like I mentioned just now, it is going to be required for 3-turn ultimates, especially with tutorial light cone. Now moving on to light cones, you can see over here, her signature light cone is going to be a best in slot, right? Pretty much no negotiation over here. And in fact, the signature light cone has the highest performance increase compared to any other light cone, right? For Black Swan personally, it is like almost 20% damage increase, and then for the team damage percentage, which includes Kafka itself, it is also 10% higher. So her signature light cone is also extremely powerful. But at the end of the day, her Eidolon 1 does hold a higher impact than her signature light cone due to the power of res down for all 4 DOT elements. Still, nonetheless, her signature light cone 1 is extremely powerful with the much needed 40% AHR, while the Prophet can trigger up to a 28.8% defense reduction. So combining this 4 stacks of Prophet with her own defense down, 4 Pierce Prisoner, the enemy target will have a roughly 87.6% defense down, and adding an additional E1 Rame or Pella, it will secure 100% defense down, which is just creating a massive damage increase. So for players who are pulling Black Swan, this signature light cone 1 is extremely powerful. Then for other substitutes, we can pretty much use S5 Eyes of the Prey, which is going to be the next best alternative due to 40% AHR and 40% damage, both of which are very useful, especially the EHR portion, since it does translate into damage percentage, as well as increasing Arcana's chance to trigger, right? S5 is Showtime is going to be our new MOC Lightcone for 2.0, offering up to 30% damage and 36% attack. Now, compared to Eyes of Prey, it has slightly less value from subset distribution, since effect hit rate and attack percentage, they have a 1-to-1 scaling. And in this case, Showtime does not offer any effect hit rate whatsoever, right? So because of this, Eyes of Prey will be slightly better than Showtime. Other than this, we also have S1 Incessant Rain, as well as S5 Good Night and Sleep Well. Both of them are decent alternatives for players lacking access to any of the buff. For Good Night and Sleep Well, it slightly outperforms its Showtime due to the raw damage multipliers from damage percentage, right? Remember that its Showtime, it actually doesn't offer any effect hit rate. It is only attack and damage, right? So because of this, S5 Good Night and Sleep Well is still a pretty good alternative. S1 Incessant Rain is also pretty decent. It does offer effect hit rate as well as a vulnerability debuff, but it is really niche because the crit rate is just completely wasted on Black Swan, right? So aside from the recommendations here, Kafka's signature Lightcone is technically not recommended because we would be assuming that if a player do have Kafka's signature light cone, you should have Kafka. And because of this, you should be pairing Kafka's signature light cone with Kafka and not Black Swan. For some very niche situations where if players did manage to get Kafka's signature light cone without Kafka, then I guess you guys can use it on Black Swan. But that is just a very weird scenario to be in. And then lastly, moving on to our final topic, which is going to be Black Swan's team compositions. We will be exploring this in a future video, but Black Swan's team building essentially boils down to one thing and one thing alone. Does a player have Kafka? Now, I've mentioned a lot in my previous videos, Kafka is basically really important for Black Swan to have a much higher damage output. So if players do have Kafka, then Black Swan, Kafka, Sustain, as well as an AoE support like Runmei, Pella or Asta is gonna be the golden duty comp for the foreseeable future until another 5-star duty unit come along, right? For players without Kafka, just know that Black Swan's performance will take a considerable dive due to Arcana having a very slow ramp-up time. Although substitutes like E4 Sampo, E6 Luca, and Queen Iphone, they slightly elevate this situation due to their ability to proc DOTs respectively. It is just that they are nowhere as strong as Kafka, as you guys can see from the multipliers over here, right? Kafka's multiplier itself is just way ahead compared to all of our E6 DOT substitutes, right? So something to know. And with that, we have come to the end of our Black Swan CDN unit analysis. If you guys have any further discussions, head on over to my Discord at Pokke's Village, where we're a very active community talking about Honkaistarrail on a daily basis. If you guys want to check out my stream, that's going to be twitch.tv/MrPokke, where I'll be streaming almost every single day. Schedule will be updated on Discord. With that, we've come to the end of today's content. All the best for Black Swan pools, and I'll be seeing you guys next time. Take care. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys. Did I say I genuinely, did I say how I genuinely cannot believe this shit? I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys.